They say empathy is a sickness, a genetic corruption. In the cold, calculating perfection of the Axiom, to feel is to be flawed. My name is Lyra Vex, and my flaw was a death sentence. The twin suns of Tartarus Prime burned with vengeful fury, casting the Chromian arena in shades of rust and old blood. 250,000 throats from 100 different species roared a symphony of hate. They weren't screaming for my blood, not yet. They were screaming for the spectacle. Stripped of my royal vestments, clad in nothing but coarse synth fabric that chafed my skin raw, I stood shackled in the arena's heart. 4 obsidian pylons surrounded me, humming with latent energy. The cables that snaked from them attached to magnetic cuffs on my wrists and ankles. The air tasted of ozone and terrified sweat. My violet skin, usually the pride of the Vex lineage, was a canvas of bruises. My silver hair, a tangled, filthy mess. Above, a colossal holovid screen flickered to life, showing my brother's face, 100 times larger than life. Archon Valerius. His features, so like my own, were a perfect mask of serene disappointment, an expression he'd practiced for years in front of reflective chrome. "Citizens of the Axiom," his amplified voice boomed, a sound of polished durasteel and quiet menace. "Today, you bear witness not to an execution, but to a purification. My sister, the royal scion Lyra, stands before you tainted by the most insidious of genetic diseases." He paused for effect, letting the word hang in the superheated air. Empathy. The crowd responded with a tidal wave of revulsion. Hisses, guttural jeers, the clattering of armored claws on stone seating. In the Axiom, emotion was a plague. We had supposedly cured ourselves of generations ago, a chaotic remnant of a primitive past. To feel another's pain was to invite weakness. To love was to lose logic. I lifted my chin, my amber eyes finding the real Valerius, standing on his command platform hovering near the arena's apex. He wasn't looking at the crowd. He was looking at me, a flicker of something ugly and triumphant in his gaze. It wasn't just politics. This was personal. "Prepare the cleansing protocol," Valerius commanded, his voice devoid of the feigned sadness he projected to the masses. The 4 pylons glowed with a sickening green light. The cables attached. To my limbs began to vibrate, a low thrum that resonated deep in my bones. The cleansing protocol. A horrifically elegant execution. The pylons would discharge sequenced energy pulses, designed not to tear my body apart, but to systematically boil the blood in my veins, one limb at a time, maximizing the agony for the crowd's viewing pleasure. A tremor of genuine fear, cold and sharp, pierced my resolve. I had expected this, but the clinical reality of it was staggering. Just as the eastern pylon began to whine, its charge building, a commotion erupted from the gladiatorial gates. Shouts, the percussive blast of a disruptor rifle, the wet tearing sound of synthetic flesh meeting something far stronger. Valerius's perfect mask twitched with irritation. "What is the meaning of this interruption? Security report!" The crowd's unified hatred fractured into confusion, their heads turning towards the disturbance. The massive iron-wrought gates, designed to hold back titanic beasts, groaned and then buckled outwards, torn from their hinges as if made of foil. From the dust and shadows, a figure emerged. A man, human, a species so rare this far into the Axiom's territory, they were practically mythical, relics of a bygone era of messy biological diversity. He was colossal, nearly 7 feet of sculpted muscle that seemed too dense for his frame, as if carved from granite. Heavy inhibitor chains, thick as my arm, bound his wrists, neck, and ankles. Yet he moved with a terrifying, fluid grace. Branded onto the flesh of his neck was a designation, Subject 734. Below it, a stark warning, Volatile Asset, Pacification Protocol Omega. Blood, not his own, painted his bare chest. He was a walking slaughterhouse. The remains of his containment squad lay twisted in his wake. His head was downcast, his face obscured by a mane of dirty, matted hair, but his entire body vibrated with a contained cataclysm. Valerius, after a moment of stunned silence, laughed. A sharp, ugly sound. "Ah, the specimen has breached containment. Excellent. An unscheduled appetizer for our main course." He gestured magnanimously. "Behold, citizens, the pinnacle of our bio-warfare division, a human chassis, retro-engineered with the genetic fury of the extinct hecaton behemoths. Observe its raw, mindless power." He nodded to a technician on a nearby console. "Release the primary restraints. Let's see what it does." A pneumatic hiss echoed through the arena as the chains on his wrists fell away. Valerius turned his attention back to me, a predator toying with its meal. "A final thought, sister? Perhaps a logical fallacy to share before your tainted blood turns to steam?" I met his cold gaze. "You think you're in control, Valerius. You've never been more wrong." He sneered, the expression cracking his serene facade. "Sentimental nonsense to the very end. Technician, activate the right leg pylon. Let's begin her enlightenment." The cable on my right ankle tightened, and an agonizing, searing heat began to crawl up my leg. I clenched my jaw, refusing to scream, refusing to give him the satisfaction. The last true heir of the Vex line would not die whimpering, and then the world dissolved into thunder. The pressure vanished. My eyes, which I had squeezed shut against the pain, snapped open. Subject 734 had moved. He didn't remember a name. He didn't remember a face, a home, a sun, a sky. His world was a cage of white rooms, screaming alarms, and the eternal cold prick of needles. They had hollowed him out, scooping out his memories and his humanity, leaving behind only two things: a well of unimaginable pain and a primal, incandescent rage. But now a third thing stirred. A ghost in the machine. A splinter of a forgotten dream. The woman. The silver-haired woman in the center of the arena. Her scent on the air. A bizarre mix of ozone, fear, and something else. Something achingly familiar. Like a song he'd once known the words to. It was a catalyst. His enhanced senses went into overdrive. The roar of the crowd compressed into a distant hum. The twin suns' glare sharpened into a million points of light. He could see the dust motes dancing in the air, could smell the neurodampeners the guards were spraying into the air, could hear the frantic spike in their heartbeats. Time stretched, becoming thick and malleable. A guard, clad in the Archon's crimson armor, lunged from the left, a neural inhibitor whip crackling with blue energy. The whip was designed to short-circuit his augmented neurology, to send him into a seizure. It never had a chance. Subject 734's hand, impossibly fast, shot out and caught the whip mid-air. The energy discharge, enough to stop a charging beast, grounded itself through his bio-engineered skeleton with a shower of sparks. He didn't even flinch. He simply squeezed. The whip's handle, a composite of high-tensile polymers, crumpled like dried leaves. He twisted his arm using the guard's own momentum to pull him forward and drove a palm heel into the man's chest plate. The armor didn't just dent, it shattered, the force of the blow liquefying the organs beneath. The guard was dead before his body flew 20 meters and slammed into the arena wall. Panic erupted. "Contain it! Use lethal force! Fire the graviton bolts!" Valerius shrieked from his platform, which was now ascending rapidly. Subject 734 became a blur of controlled destruction. He didn't just fight. He dissected the battlefield. He saw trajectories, weak points, moments of hesitation. He moved through the crimson-clad soldiers not like a beast, but like a phantom. A graviton bolt, designed to crush a light vehicle, whistled towards him. He sidestepped it with millimeters to spare, the bolt striking the pylon behind him and cracking its obsidian surface. He snatched a discarded disruptor rifle from a fallen guard, tore the power cell from it, and hurled it like a grenade into a cluster of advancing soldiers. The resulting explosion sent bodies flying. Tranquilizer darts, thick as his thumb and filled with neurotoxins that could paralyze a behemoth, peppered his back and thighs. He barely felt them, his hypermetabolism burning the toxins away as fast as they could be injected, converting them into fuel for his rage. A high-frequency sonic pulse filled the air, a weapon designed specifically for him to overload his auditory senses and rupture his inner ears. He roared, a sound that was less human and more geological, a tectonic plate grinding in fury. The sonic wave wavered and died. And through the maelstrom of violence, the crimson haze of his battle fury, one singular crystalline thought remained: protect the woman. Reach the woman. Two biomechanical war dogs, quadrupedal machines with plasma casters for jaws, charged him from opposite sides. He didn't try to fight them both. Instead, he dropped, sliding on the bloody sand, and with impossible strength, ripped one of the humming power cables from its mooring on the ground. He cracked it like a whip, the live current arcing through the air, and wrapped it around the legs of one of the charging constructs. The machine sparked, seized, and crashed into its companion. Sparks and shrapnel flew. He vaulted over the wreckage, a predator clearing an obstacle, and landed softly on the sand before her. Their eyes met. Amber and abyss. He saw no fear in her gaze. He saw recognition. The remaining two pylons, still connected to her wrists, began to glow. He didn't hesitate. He grabbed the thick cables, ignoring the raw energy that coursed over his skin, and pulled. Not with brute force, but with a precise, focused strength that targeted the magnetic locks. Metal shrieked, groaned, and then snapped. With movements that were now shockingly gentle, he uncoupled the magnetic cuffs from her delicate wrists, his massive, blood-soaked fingers moving with the care of a surgeon. "Kill them! Incinerate them both!" Valerius's voice was a hysterical screech, his composure utterly gone. The remaining soldiers, dozens of them, formed a semicircle, leveling their heavy weapons. Subject 734 turned, placing his body squarely between her and the threat. He would die here. He would turn this entire arena into a graveyard, but he would not let them touch her. "Wait," a voice whispered, so quiet it should have been lost in the chaos. But he heard it. It cut through his rage, through the combat protocols screaming in his mind. He paused. The inferno within him did not die, but for the first time in his memory, it banked, awaiting a command from a source other than his own broken psyche. The soldiers hesitated, their own logical minds struggling to process what they were seeing. The Axiom's most lethal weapon, a creature of pure, uncontrollable aggression, had just been halted by a single word from its intended victim. Lyra took a step towards him, her movements unsteady but regal. "You've spilled enough blood on my account." The words were for him alone. He turned to face her fully, and deep within the wreckage of his mind, something shifted. A wall crumbled. The storm of rage didn't just quiet. It receded, pulling back to reveal a desolate, silent landscape of confusion and a profound, aching loneliness. And then, to the utter astonishment of 25,000 onlookers and one furious Archon, the monster knelt. He dropped to the blood-stained sand before her, his head bowed, not like a defeated warrior, but like a lost soul finally finding its way home. His hands, still dripping with the blood of his enemies, trembled uncontrollably. The arena fell into a stunned, absolute silence. Lyra, bruised and exhausted, raised a trembling hand. Her fingers, impossibly gentle, brushed against his sweat-matted hair. He flinched. A full-body tremor, not of fear, but of profound, overwhelming shock. It was the first gentle touch he could remember. It was agony. It was ecstasy. "It's over now," she whispered, her voice the only sound in the vast, silent space. The last of the tension drained from his massive frame. He surrendered to the strange new sensation of safety. His forehead came to rest against her waist, a contact so light it defied his immense size. The voices in his head, the ones that shrieked for violence, for release, for death, finally fell silent. For the first time in his life, there was peace. High above, Valerius's face was a mask of pure, unadulterated hatred. "What is this farce? Guards! I want them both in atoms! Fire everything!" But the guards didn't move. They stood frozen, weapons half lowered, staring at the impossible tableau before them. They had witnessed something beyond their tactical understanding. A weapon had found its purpose. A beast had found its queen. Lyra's arms wrapped around the kneeling giant's head, holding him as if he were the most precious thing in the universe. Her amber eyes, filled with a sorrow that transcended her own pain, lifted to meet her brother's. "This is the end, Valerius," she called out, her voice ringing with newfound power across the silent arena. "You tried to show them a monster. Instead, you have shown them my heart, and you have just lost your empire." The escape from Tartarus Prime was a maelstrom of fire and chaos. With Subject 734, whom she had started calling Cinder, a name that felt whispered from a half-remembered dream, at her side, Lyra had used the ensuing pandemonium to seize a medical transport shuttle. Now, 5 days later, they were fugitives, hiding in the rusted guts of a decommissioned asteroid mining facility in the Charybdis Belt. The silence of the void was a stark contrast to the arena's roar. Lyra sat on the cold metal deck, her eyes closed, not in meditation, but in excavation, digging through the painful strata of her memory. She was a child again, no older than 7, in the Hall of Ascension on Axiom Prime. The air hummed, thick with the sterile scent of recycled atmosphere and the faint, metallic tang of the Empire's rigid logic. Quantum light filtered through the hall's data crystal windows, illuminating the floating holographic statues of their ancestors, a long line of emotionless, perfect rulers. Her small hand was lost in the grip of her brother, Valerius, already 9 and a perfect miniature of their father. "The axiom does not pass to the firstborn, but to the most flawless," the disembodied voice of the Dynasty Protocol intoned, its synthesized tones echoing in the cavernous space. "The one whose genetic code resonates in perfect harmony with the principles of pure logic." Valerius's spine was ramrod straight, his grip on her hand a vice. He had already learned to purge the childish tells of feeling, to present a face of serene neutrality. They walked past the artifacts of their lineage, the neural crown that suppressed all emotional responses, the star charts of their relentless logical expansion, the helixes of their own carefully curated DNA. At the far end of the hall rested the Origin Stone, a pulsating crystal of unknown composition that predated their civilization. It was said to reflect the true nature of any who touched it. "Approach, children of Vex," the protocol commanded. "Present your essence." Valerius went first. He placed his palm on the stone's surface with practiced confidence. The crystal flared with a cold, brilliant white light, the color of pure, untainted logic. The assembled elders and ministers nodded their silent, robotic approval. Then it was her turn. She remembered the trembling in her hand as she reached out. The stone was not cold as she expected, but warm, thrumming with a strange, vibrant energy. The moment her skin made contact, the impossible happened. The Origin Stone did not glow white. It exploded with color, a dazzling, brilliant supernova of deep blue, radiant gold, and soft rose. The colors of empathy, of compassion, of love. Resonances that had been systematically purged from the royal bloodline for 1,000 years. A collective gasp, a sound of synchronized shock echoed through the hall. "A corruption," one elder hissed. "Genetic regression. The sequence is flawed." Lyra stood mesmerized by the beautiful forbidden light, not understanding the horror on the faces around her. She only understood that the stone was responding to the part of her that could feel the nervous energy of the guards, the quiet pride of her father, and the sudden, sharp spike of something acidic and cold from her brother. She turned to share the wonder with Valerius. But the look on his face was not one of shared awe. It was a look of profound betrayal, of a dark, coiling jealousy that was terrifying in its intensity. That night, hiding behind a tapestry, she heard his voice, sharp and cold, cutting through the silence of their father's study. "She is a contagion, father. A throwback. Empathy is a vulnerability. The axiom cannot be led by the weak." Her father's voice was weary, heavy with a burden she didn't understand. The stone has chosen Valerius. For the first time in millennia, it has shown the true spectrum. We cannot deny its will. Then I will deny her, Valerius had vowed, his child's voice dripping with an adult's venom. I will spend my life proving she is unworthy of the name Vex. The memory dissolved, leaving Lyra shivering in the cold, dusty shelter. She opened her eyes. Cinder was watching her, his dark eyes no longer clouded by rage, filled with a quiet, intense concern. He was relearning language, his mind absorbing it with frightening speed, but he communicated more with his gaze than his halting words. "You saw a bad thing," he stated, his voice a low rumble. Lyra managed a faint smile. "The day my brother declared war on me." Cinder shifted his massive frame, moving closer with a caution that was at odds with his size. He sat on the floor opposite her, his presence a strange comfort. "He fears you." "Yes," Lyra said, surprised by his perception. "Valerius fears anything he cannot quantify and control, and he has never understood the heart. He wants you dead. Because you feel?" Cinder's brow furrowed, a complex tapestry of confusion and dawning comprehension. The Axiom teaches that emotion is a flaw that corrupts judgment, a chaos that must be contained. For centuries, we have striven for the purity of cold logic. The origin stone chose me not in spite of my feelings, but because of them. Valerius sees that as a fundamental threat to our entire civilization. Cinder was silent for a long time, processing this. Then he looked at her, his gaze unwavering. "But it makes you strong, not weak." A genuine smile touched Lyra's lips, the first since the arena. Yes, and that, Cinder, is what terrifies him more than anything else. Their journey to find the truth was a desperate gambit. Lyra's fragmented knowledge pointed them to a single location, a defunct cryo-research station on the dead moon of Erebus, a place her father had mentioned only once in whispers. It took them weeks, navigating through hostile corporate territories and Axiom patrol routes, their small shuttle a ghost in the void. During this time, a new dynamic formed between them. She taught him about the galaxy, about stars and history and art. He, in turn, began to open up, sharing the disjointed, nightmarish fragments of his memory. White rooms, the faces of cold, detached scientists, and endless, agonizing training simulations. The station on Erebus was a tomb, encased in ice and silence. Lyra's royal genetic signature was the only key that could bypass the centuries of lockdown. Inside, the air was frigid, and emergency lights cast long, dancing shadows. "My father said this was one of the Axiom's first off-world labs," Lyra explained, her breath misting in the cold. "From before the Great Purification, before they purged all unnecessary genetic traits. They found the central data core, miraculously preserved in the cold." As Lyra's fingers flew across the holographic interface, bypassing ancient security, Cinder prowled the room, his senses on high alert, his discomfort in the sterile, lab-like environment palpable. "Here," Lyra whispered, her voice tight with anticipation. "Project Chimera." The display filled with data streams, schematics, and video logs. And at the center of it all, a holographic image of a young human boy, no more than 5 years old, floating in a suspension tank, his eyes wide with a terror that transcended the years. Below the image, the designation, Subject 734. Cinder stepped forward, his breathing becoming harsh. "That is me." "Yes," Lyra confirmed, her voice soft. Her eyes scanned the primary research log. "They didn't find you, Cinder. They made you. Grown from a matrix of human genetic material, chosen for its resilience and adaptability." Cinder's hands clenched into fists, the knuckles white. "Engineered. A tool." "More than that," Lyra said, her voice dropping as she read further. "They enhanced you. Your genome was spliced with DNA from the Hecaton, a predator species from a dead world renowned for their adaptive biology, regenerative capabilities, and a state of battle frenzy that allowed them to tear through armored foes." She looked up at him, her expression grim. "They were hunted to extinction because they were too powerful, too impossible to control. So I am not human. he stated, the words flat, hollow. "You are more than they ever intended," Lyra countered fiercely, her attention drawn to a new file. A video log. It flickered to life, showing the same small boy, now perhaps 7, in a sterile observation room. And across from him, a small silver-haired girl in formal Axiom attire. A girl who was unmistakably Lyra. "It's us," Cinder whispered, moving closer to the hologram. In the recording, the young Lyra offered the boy a nutrient paste bar, a forbidden treat. As their fingers brushed, monitoring equipment in the background lit up, showing a massive spike in the boy's neural activity. A cold, clinical voice narrated over the scene. Subject 734 continues to exhibit anomalous emotional responses despite neural dampening protocols. A peculiar attachment has formed with the royal scion, subject L1. Intriguingly, this emotional bond appears to significantly enhance the subject's combat effectiveness. When perceiving a threat to subject L1, aggression and tactical acuity increase by over 60%. Cinder slammed a fist against the console, cracking the crystalline surface. "They used you. They used you to point me like a weapon." "No," Lyra corrected, her eyes locked on the screen as the recording jumped ahead. A different scientist was speaking now. "The Archon has ordered the termination of the emotional imprinting experiment. He deems the attachment a potential vulnerability. However, before memory wiping both subjects, we will conduct a final test, simulate the permanent loss of subject L1, and trigger the asset's full combat protocols. We need to know what happens when the beast believes its heart has been torn out." "My father," Lyra whispered, her mind reeling. "This wasn't my father's project. This was Valerius. He was involved even then. He didn't just want me gone. He wanted to forge a weapon from my existence, to turn my own empathy into a trigger for a monster." Cinder stared at the images, at the two children caught in a cold, cruel experiment, and the broken pieces of his past began to coalesce, not into a clear picture, but into a feeling of a bond that was forged not in a lab, but by a little girl who shared her food with a lonely, terrified boy. "Your empathy," he said slowly, looking from the hologram to her. "It wasn't a trigger for my rage. It was an anchor. The only thing that kept me from becoming what they wanted me to be." His dark eyes met hers, filled with a certainty that defied his broken memory. "My purpose was never to be his monster. It was always to be your shield." He spoke the words as if he had known them his entire life. The escape from Erebus marked a turning point. With the data crystal containing the truth of Cinder's creation and Valerius's early atrocities, Lyra was no longer just a fugitive. She was a symbol. Word of her survival, carried by rogue traders and whispered in the dark corners of the Axiom, began to spread. They found allies in the outer colonies, worlds populated by species the Axiom deemed genetically inferior, who had suffered for centuries under Valerius's puritanical rule. A rebellion, disorganized but simmering with years of resentment, began to coalesce around her. Their base of operations became a hollowed-out asteroid, once a pirate stronghold, known only as the Crucible. It was a labyrinth of tunnels and hidden hangars, a microcosm of the galactic diversity the Axiom sought to erase. In the heart of this burgeoning resistance, Lyra and Cinder's bond deepened. The nights were long and filled with the ghosts of their pasts. Lyra was plagued by nightmares of the arena, of her brother's cold eyes, of the weight of an empire she never wanted. Cinder was haunted by flashes of memory, sensory shrapnel from his conditioning. The smell of antiseptic, the hum of a neural scanner, the phantom pain of an inhibitor collar. They found solace in each other. "He tried to make you a beast," she whispered one night, tracing the branded designation on his neck. "But he couldn't erase your soul." Cinder captured her hand, his touch surprisingly gentle. "They tried to make you a machine, but they couldn't extinguish your fire." In the dim light of the Crucible's command center, surrounded by star charts and the quiet hum of life support, he leaned in. Their first kiss was not a tender exploration. It was a collision, a desperate, raw acknowledgement of the pain and survival that bound them together. It tasted of loneliness and fear, but beneath it, the unmistakable spark of hope. The rebellion needed more than a symbol. It needed proof that could shatter Valerius's pristine image. The data from Erebus was damning, but it was ancient. Lyra knew she needed something current, something undeniable. Their target, the Genesis Vault on Cygnus X1, Valerius's primary genetic research facility and the heart of his eugenics programs. Infiltrating the Genesis Vault was a suicide mission. It was a fortress of chrome and plasma fields, patrolled by the Archon's elite Crimson Guard. But their small team, led by a grizzled Xylosian captain named Kyle, who had lost his family to Valerius's purges, managed to slip through the security net using a stolen freighter. The inside of the facility was a sterile nightmare. Cinder moved like a shadow, his enhanced senses detecting guard patrols long before they were visible, his body tense with a visceral hatred for the place that so resembled his own personal hell. Lyra, using her old royal access codes, sliced through the internal security. They reached the central data core, a cathedral of glowing data stacks. "He's not just purging undesirable traits." Lyra breathed, her face illuminated by the holographic displays. "He's creating entire slave species, forcibly adapting colonial populations to serve as laborers, soldiers, living tools." The files were horrific. Children stolen from their families, their bodies and minds twisted by forced genetic manipulation. As she copied the files onto a secure data crystal, a gut-wrenching realization dawned. This isn't just about control, Cinder. This is a business. He's selling these people to the corporate syndicates in the unaligned territories. It was then that the trap was sprung. Alarms blared, crimson lights flashed, and blast doors slammed shut, sealing them in. "He knew!" Kale growled, firing his pulse rifle at the first wave of Crimson Guards. "He let us walk right in." They were pinned down, hopelessly outnumbered. Cinder fought with a cold, brutal efficiency, a whirlwind of motion that disabled guards without killing them, a restraint that spoke volumes about his control. But there were too many. A heavy plasma blast caught Kale in the chest, sending him sprawling. As Lyra rushed to his side, the squad leader of the Crimson Guard stepped forward, his weapon aimed directly at her head. "Princess Vex, the Archon sends his regards. You are to be taken alive. The asset, however, is to be pacified. Permanently." Cinder tensed, his body coiled like a spring. He could take them all down, but not before they fired. Lyra would be caught in the crossfire. The beast inside him stirred, a familiar, intoxicating inferno, whispering promises of survival through absolute destruction. For a moment, he felt himself slipping, the red haze threatening to consume his consciousness. Then Lyra's hand touched his arm. He looked at her. She was kneeling by the dying Kyle, her face a mask of profound grief, yet her amber eyes were clear, focused on him. She didn't speak, but he felt her thoughts, her emotions, projected into his mind with a clarity that startled him. "Don't fight it, guide it. It is not your enemy. It is a part of you. Use it." The squad leader barked the order to fire, and Cinder made his choice. He didn't suppress the rage. He didn't surrender to it. He merged with it. His body underwent a terrifying, beautiful transformation. His muscles swelled, veins darkening under his skin. His fingers elongated into razor-sharp talons. His features sharpened, becoming predatory, feral. But his eyes remained his own, clear and intelligent, burning with a controlled fire. He moved faster than their targeting systems could track. He wasn't a mindless berserker. He was a weapon perfected. He disarmed the squad leader with a flick of his wrist, shattering the plasma rifle. He moved through the other guards not as a killer, but as a force of nature, using their own momentum against them, breaking weapons, not bones. He was a storm, but a storm with a purpose. When it was over, the entire squad lay unconscious or restrained, and Lyra was untouched. He stood in the center of the room, his transformed body radiating immense power, yet his breathing was steady. He had finally achieved balance. Not human, not beast, but both. Whole. "We have what we came for," he said, his voice a low, resonant growl, yet perfectly controlled. "It's time to show the galaxy the truth." That night, on their stolen ship as it sliced through hyperspace, Lyra came to his quarters. The transformation had receded, but it had left its mark. His eyes were darker, his presence more intense, a primal energy humming just beneath his skin. There were no words. There was no need for them. Their coming together was a raw, primal celebration of survival, a fusion of two souls who had been forged in the same fire. It was the tenderness of her empathy meeting the fierce protectiveness of his rage. And in the quiet aftermath, tangled in the sheets, she traced the faint, fading patterns of the transformation on his arms. "You're not just a shield," she whispered. "You're my anchor." He pulled her closer, his arms a fortress around her. "And you," he murmured against her hair, "are my entire universe." The data from the Genesis Vault detonated across the galactic networks like a supernova. The evidence of Valerius's atrocities, the slave species, the illegal trade with corporate syndicates, the experimentation on children, was undeniable. His carefully crafted image of a logical, benevolent ruler shattered, systems on the verge of rebellion now openly declared for Lyra. The mineral guilds, whose people had been targeted for labor adaptation, pledged their fleets to her cause. Even elements of the Axiom military, disgusted by the dishonor of their archon, began to defect. Within months, the Axiom was fractured, a civil war raging across a dozen sectors. Valerius, cornered and desperate, recalled his forces to defend the throne world of Axiom Prime. He was fortifying his position, preparing for a final decisive battle. During a war council meeting aboard their new flagship, the Origin, a defector from Valerius's inner circle provided chilling intelligence. "The Archon is accelerating Project Chimera," the terrified scientist reported. "He's creating new assets based on Subject 734's template, but he's removing the emotional component entirely. Pure biological engines of war." Cinder's expression darkened. "Without the anchor, they will be unstable, uncontrollable." "That is his intent," the scientist confirmed. "He plans to unleash them on the rebel fleet. He doesn't care if they destroy his own forces in the process. He would rather rule over a kingdom of ashes than surrender his throne." The final assault on Axiom Prime was a desperate, brutal affair. As the rebel fleet engaged Valerius's orbital defenses, Lyra and Cinder led an elite strike team, infiltrating the Imperial Spire through a network of forgotten service tunnels. They fought their way upwards, Cinder moving in his controlled, transformed state, a perfect synthesis of warrior and guardian. As they neared the throne room, a strange, high-frequency hum filled the air. Cinder stumbled, clutching his head, a roar of agony escaping his lips. "Automated defenses!" he snarled, fighting against the sonic assault specifically tuned to his enhanced biology. Designed to trigger an uncontrolled transformation. To turn me back into a mindless beast. "Cinder!" Lyra cried out, torn between pressing the attack and helping him. "Go!" he commanded, his body spasming as he fought the internal war. "End this! I will find you." With a look of profound trust, Lyra and the remaining soldiers pushed forward, leaving him to face his demons. They breached the doors of the throne room. Valerius was there, waiting, not surrounded by his crimson guard, but by three monstrous figures. They were grotesque parodies of Cinder, humanoid in shape, but with skin the color of bruised flesh, muscles bulging unnaturally, their eyes vacant, soulless orbs. "Sister?" Valerius greeted her, his voice calm, almost cheerful. "Welcome home. I've been so eager to introduce you to the family's newest additions. Chimera 2.0. All of the power, none of the sentimental weakness." "It's over, Valerius," Lyra said, her voice ringing with authority. "Your allies have abandoned you. Your empire is collapsing. An empire can be rebuilt," he retorted with a dismissive wave. "But first the rot must be purged." He gestured to the abominations at his side. "They have no messy emotional attachments. They obey only one command, my will." The throne room doors exploded inwards. Cinder stood there, his body battered but his will unbroken. He was still in his transformed state, but he was in complete control. Valerius laughed. "The original prototype. How fitting. Let's see how you fare against the perfected model." But he didn't order his new creations to attack. Instead, he raised a small crystalline device. "You see, sister, I learned from my mistakes. I finally deciphered the key to your little pet. The emotional anchor isn't a failsafe. It's a backdoor." He activated the device. An excruciating silent pulse of psychic energy slammed into Cinder. It wasn't a sonic attack. It was a neural override, a command protocol buried deep within his genetic code, a master key that even he didn't know existed. Pain, absolute and overwhelming, tore through him. The beast roared, not in controlled rage, but in pure, mindless agony. His vision flooded with red. His control shattered. "You see?" Valerius gloated, his smile widening. "No matter how much you pretend, you are nothing but a program. And now, execute final command protocol, Omega." He pointed a trembling finger at Lyra. "Erase the anchor." Cinder's body convulsed as the two directives warred within him. Protect Lyra, and the new overriding command, destroy Lyra. The beast surged, fueled by the artificial command, more powerful than ever before. He was losing. He could feel his consciousness, his very self, being shredded, overwritten by the kill code. He let out a final desperate roar, a sound of utter despair. But through the psychic static, through the agony, he felt something else, a gentle touch in his mind. Lyra. She wasn't fighting the override. She was embracing it with him. She poured her own empathy, her love, her essence, down the psychic link the device had opened. She wasn't just his anchor. She was his shield, his partner. She met the kill code not with force, but with acceptance, surrounding the vile command with a love so pure and absolute that it couldn't be overwritten. It could only be integrated. Cinder's mind cleared. The pain vanished. The transformation didn't recede. It perfected. He stood, no longer a man or a beast, but something transcendent. The raw power of the hecaton, guided by the unshakable will of a man who had chosen to love. He looked at Valerius, and for the first time, his eyes glowed with a soft amber light, mirroring Lyra's. "No," Cinder said, his voice a chorus of man and myth. With impossible speed, he moved. The three chimera abominations reacted, but they were machines. He was life. He dismantled them with a grace that was terrifying to behold, exploiting their design flaws, turning their mindless strength into a fatal weakness. When it was over, he stood before a stunned, disbelieving Valerius. "I don't need to defeat you," Cinder said, his voice calm. "You have already lost." Lyra stepped forward, her presence filling the throne room. She looked at the assembled nobles who had cowered during the fight. "The Axiom is dead," she declared. "Today we build something new, a union, not of logic, but of life, not of purity, but of purpose." One by one, the nobles knelt. Valerius, his face a ruin of broken pride, collapsed to his knees. "Mercy, sister," he whimpered. "Yes," Lyra said, her gaze unwavering. "Mercy, the first law of our new union." The years that followed were a whirlwind of creation. Empress Lyra Vex, the empath, and her consort Cinder, the first guardian, didn't just rebuild an empire, they transformed it. The Axiom's rigid laws were replaced by a charter that celebrated diversity. Art, music, and emotion, once suppressed, flourished. Cinder found his purpose not just as Lyra's shield, but as her partner in every sense. He became a diplomat, his unique perspective allowing him to bridge the gaps between disparate cultures. The beast within him was not gone, but integrated, a source of strength and intuition that he could call upon at will. On the 15th anniversary of the Union's founding, they stood in the palace's sky garden, watching the twin suns set. Their son, Kalin, named after the fallen Zelosian captain, chased after glowing lumen moths, his laughter echoing in the twilight. He had his mother's violet skin and his father's intense dark eyes. "He asked me today if it was true," Cinder said, his arm around Lyra's waist. "If I was once a monster." Lyra leaned her head on his shoulder. "What did you tell him?" "I told him that monsters are made, not born," Cinder replied, his gaze soft as he watched their son. "And that the greatest strength is not the power to destroy, but the courage to choose what you build." Lyra smiled, her heart full. "They called empathy a sickness," she whispered, "but it was the cure." Cinder looked at her, his love a tangible presence between them. "For all of us." Deep in the Union archives, on a simple crystalline stand, sat two crudely made rings of shell, relics from a dead moon, a testament to a bond forged in a laboratory and tempered in the fires of revolution. A quiet, enduring symbol that choice could rewrite any code, and that even in the coldest, most logical of universes, the most powerful force of all was a heart that dared to feel. If you were captivated by the journey of Lyra and Cinder and want to explore more stories of rebellion, love, and what it truly means to be human, then make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to ring the notification bell so you won't miss our next epic tale. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. What part of their story resonated with you the most? Your support fuels our storytelling. Until next time, keep choosing love over logic.